You're listening to Miracles in Manhattan. And this is Marco, just here to say thank you, because while you're listening to Miracles in Manhattan, you're not necessarily in Manhattan, as our analytics are showing us. So I want to say hi to our listeners in Germany, China, and Japan, as well as to everybody who gave us a fantastic review on iTunes or other platforms, which helps immensely. To that, I even wanted to just shout out a couple of the names of several people who have left us a written review, which is about the best thing you can do for a podcast you like. As befits, if you do leave a review, we will get around to putting you on blast at the top of each episode. So for this week, Sugarpunk, Helen, Georgia M., you have our deep gratitude. Next week, we will tackle Lesson 3, which will be a kind of special episode with enough racy content to merit a content warning, which, in my book, makes it an episode worth listening to and anticipating. So I hope you feel the same way when you get to it. It's the kind of, it'll make up your mind about the podcast, I think. But first things first, this week, we end up talking about some relationship survival stories, some survival stories about living in this city and others, sober and otherwise, and Lesson 2 from A Course in Miracles, because that's what we do here most of the time. So again, thanks for listening. Enjoy the episode and tune in next week for a real humdinger. All right, thank you and adios.
When you've been caught in the world of perception, you are caught in a dream.
I'd come out of some kind of exchange with somebody really sort of irritated. So it was like a kind of quasi-dating, it was a quasi-dating experience in which somebody spent like the better part of our conversation talking to me about how busy they were. Mm-hmm. And I think that's actually, it's like right head to head with dreams in terms of the most boring topic that you can share with another human being, how busy you are.
Well, of course, absolutely. We're going to be undoing the way we see now to help us on the way to enlightenment, or correct perception and happiness and serenity, which is what we all want.
That's not an uncommon theme in spirituality or religious texts, and kind of an unmaking before a making happens. You're a sober person right now, but you weren't always, right?
Correct. I came
covered
here.
in A Course in Miracles. This is not me just sort of outing you.
You mean The Art of Forgiveness?
Yeah, right. the book you wrote, not the one you didn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry.
It's probably.
She said that people who move to New York are all looking for something, but are also by their nature masochists.
And that's what I was looking for. And by traumatized, I mean extremely challenged.
Okay.
To the point of almost homelessness. And that happens to a lot of people who move here. Mm-hmm. It gets hard. It gets really hard. Really hard. New Yorkers would prefer that interesting things happen to them rather than good things.
Yeah, writing is a spiritual act, I think. It's not a spiritual act is living in New York City and hearing this fucking construction everywhere. Anyway.
Well,
on we go.
Let's think of it like our lives are under construction.
Okay. Yeah, that's true.
They prefer to be interested than happy. They prefer to be challenged than happy.
Right. I should add this is being recorded in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
And then, you either leave.
Right.
Or you stay. And you work through it. You work beyond it.
As well as a spiritual program, this is also a guide on, how to move to and live in New York City from two people who do it all right. Go on.
I have no idea where we are now, so...
Okay, I think we're good. Whenever you're ready, we could just sort of go into it.
So should we look at lesson 2?
Yeah, let's do it.
So lesson 2 reads like this. I have given everything I see in this room, on this street, from this window, in this place, all the meaning that it has for me. So that is a different way of saying what lesson 1 did. Lesson 1, nothing I see in this room means anything. Lesson 2, I've given everything I see in this room all the meaning that it has. So we're dismantling the way that we are used to perceiving. So, I would just summarize it as, I give everything in my life meaning because I've projected that meaning onto it from my inner world. And the text talks about this pretty early on. It says the world we see merely reflects our own internal frame of reference. I came to New York, I think, partly because I was used to being traumatized. Yeah. And I wanted to live in a place that continued to traumatize me. That sounds like kind of a bit blacker than it was, but that was the impulse because I was used to that, right? I was used to that.
The police sirens make perfect for this story.
And that's what made me feel alive. These continual traumas, because that's how my brain and my body had been conditioned from childhood.
Right. And not to jump the gun, but it sort of sounds like you were exchanging one form of trauma for another. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Projection makes perception. That's on page 445. Projection makes perception. And it goes on to say, when you've been caught in the world of perception, you are caught in a dream. That's key. That's a key concept. When we're caught in a world of perception, we're caught in a dream. So we're projecting our own perceptions from our inner world.
Right.
And we believe that to be real, but it's just a dream.
Sort of being in a quasi-fictional environment at all times.
Yeah, of our own making. Yeah.
Right.
And we think it's real.
That's heavy.
Yeah.
That's heavy.
Well, yeah. Yeah, this course acknowledges that as well. It advises us not to judge these concepts as we begin. Page 2, the introduction to the workbook. Remember only this: you need not believe the ideas, you need not accept them, and you need not even welcome them. Some of them you may actively resist, but it doesn't matter. You just keep going. Especially at the beginning. Just keep going, see what happens.
Right. And that concept seems to be a real bedrock for empathy because maybe, one thing to note is that you know this text better than I do. Or actually, I guess kind of maybe the nice thing about this podcast is that part of the structure of it can be that I'll hear the lesson for the first time as we go, which makes less preparation work for me. But also, my immediate reaction is that tells me that I can imagine a chapter coming up that encourages you to empathize with others who are going to be in the same position as living in a world that is dominated by their perceptions.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Right? That's absolutely it.
Think of an office with that there's 100 people in, and how many perceptions are on a cubicle.
What happened at a meeting?
Right, sure.
You come out of a meeting and it's like everyone heard something different. Like, what? She didn't mean that. He didn't mean that. He was just asking what?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely it. Empathy for others in their own illusions, just like you are. And that's where forgiveness is the tool. It's the path to enlightenment, because we can forgive others for their misperceptions, for their projections onto us, and forgive ourselves for our projections onto them. And so it goes.
Makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. And you're a sober person right now, but you weren't always, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
This is covered in A Course in Miracles. This is not me just sort of outing you.
You mean The Art of Forgiveness?
Yeah, right. The book you wrote, not the one you didn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry.
It's probably covered. I probably mentioned it in there. I don't know. But anyway, that's completely fine. So when I came here, I was drinking heavily, and among other things, and I was here for a few years, and then I became sober. Yeah, that was the ring of fire or whatever,
Oh, okay.
that I walked through, and
wow,
and that was the beginning. That was the beginning of reconstructing.
Sure. I didn't realize that you got sober in New York, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
I did.
And so did I.
Well, New York does that because it gets really hard here. like back in Australia, I could live on the couch in the backyard, which is what I was doing.
Right.
Because it was pretty sunny all the time. And the houses are big. There's lots of space. And then when it got a bit cold, then I moved inside the house, my friend's house.
Right.
One of the guys who was living there was an airline mechanic, and he came home with the side of a box that had contained a huge piece of an aircraft, and that became the wall of my bedroom.
The side of an aircraft,
the side of the box that contained the aircraft piece.
Okay. All right.
So it was a wooden box. It was very, and so that was that. That was my room, and I think I lived there for like $20 a week or something. Yeah, you can't do that in New York.
No. Well, yeah, no, not.
No, not in Manhattan. No. So it gets hard. So we hit bottom here.
We do.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't sleeping on the subway except when I passed out drunk.
right. Except when. That's the Manhattan is the city of except when. Have you found practicing that in your own day-to-day life to be useful?
Yes.
Okay. How? This is definitely, yeah.
Yes.
How have you found that to be useful in your day-to-day life? And maybe the mic is like a little more.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Not facing.
You can move the whole chair too.
I'm just. Oh my Lord. How have I found this useful?
My ex's name is still like a login option on my computer.
Oh, so is mine.
Right. And I went to great pains 2 weeks ago to make sure that you actually can't log in through that.
Yeah, right.
Out of a paranoia. But I haven't deleted the name yet. And that's really dumb.
Yeah, Yeah. Yeah, because that's going to trigger memories, right? That's going to trigger your inner world to throw up thoughts, to throw up.
To throw up, yeah.
Just to throw up.
Yeah.
Sounds, smells, feelings, and then suddenly you're in the past.
Right. Oh God. Sorry. No, this is it. This is what it's all about. This is what the hell we're going through every day, all of us. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've been, I'm as this kind of divorce rolls on or is complete, or I don't know what it is, but I've been in a state of I think I'm kind of like cozying up to like a PTSD kind of space. If a part of that involves like things you can't control, like waking nightmares and things like that, not to get like really heavy on the podcast. But maybe the less reminders there are of triggers like that, the less likely those experiences are to happen. Well, of course,
absolutely. That's what I did. That's the first thing I did when my boyfriend, who was living with me and my kids, came home and told me that he'd been seeing someone else and was moving out. I insisted that he leave right at that moment, and
Right.
that he come and collect his stuff the next day before midnight, or it would be on the street.
Right. You also said something else to him that has been rattling around in my head, something rather, I want to say grown up or sort of advanced spiritually.
Well, thank you.
Well, if you don't remember what it is, then maybe it wasn't. But didn't you sort of say something along the lines of like, we can edit this, of course.
Yeah.
I can't tell you the amount of times I've heard the phrase "we can edit this out" in a podcast before, but
And then they don't.
They don't. But you sort of opened the door to a discussion, right? Or a forgiveness, or a
Yes, of course.
There's not enough course though, because that's the exact opposite of my situation.
What you're saying, I did, yeah, because a couple of days later he texted me and said, he made a grave error. He'd acted foolishly, and could we? And he wanted to continue to date me, and I said, well, no, it need to take time, and then I would consider it.
Right.
But the point I think you're bringing up is that I can forgive him for causing me this pain because he was doing his best. He was doing the best he could at the time. And also, he gave me the gift of my being able to cut him off completely, because he said to me he'd been seeing someone else. Now that's like a clear kind of, you can't really argue that is wrong, if you like,
it's a
in a relationship. It's a bright, as we all kind of agree as a society, that's a thing where you can say, leave right now.
Sure.
And he gave me that gift, right? So it didn't have to be messy, drawn out. I didn't have to feel doubt. I didn't have to feel guilt. I didn't have to struggle with anything.
Phone or anything like that,
Yeah, I didn't.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't have to, and I didn't have to keep in contact with him. I could just say leave and feel fine about it, and that was really perfect, because it's made things so much easier for me to move on. It made it easier for me to move on and just make the decision to work through, to process the emotions, and move on. So I can forgive him because that was the perfect way for him to go about it, right? Lying to me was a perfect way to go about it, because that gave me the opportunity to make a clean cut, right? Seeing someone else, starting a relationship with someone else while he was in one with me was the perfect way to go about it, because he was done. There was no arguing. There was no way. Yeah, I wasn't about to convince him to give us another shot or stay or whatever.
Right. It shifted onto him to do that, if anyone was going to do it at all.
So everything worked out perfectly.
Yeah, sure. That, it brings me at least a little bit back to the piece of the lesson you were talking to about earlier, about in a kind of more advanced way how everyone is perceiving things differently, because I do wonder, and I'm sure on this podcast we'll never find out, but what was going through his head, or what goes through another partner's head in another situation when they come clean, when they do something like that, their perceptions are certainly at play as well.
Yeah.
Interesting. Cool. So incidentally, for me, that is a good, that can be a good, if you think there's more digging into that lesson that you want to do, that's great. But that can be a very doable length, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and based on the time, we have no reason not to continue with another one if you're down.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool.
Is that so? Anything to? And I apologize in advance for like jumping into personal.
No. That's the whole point of it.
Okay.
We have to, because that's
the
human condition. That's what it's all about.
Right. And I think that I think that it will be more helpful to people. There's nothing helpful about a spiritual lecturer who's like a perfect.
God, no.
Right?
No, God, no.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
So we're doing lesson 3 then?
Yeah, we are doing lesson 3.
Okay, so lesson 3 reads...
This episode of Miracles in Manhattan is a co-production of Wild Stories and Rogue Signal Studios. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe on iTunes and leave us a 5-star review and maybe a comment. It takes just a second and it helps us reach a broader audience.
And if you have any questions for us, email us at miraclesinmanhattan@gmail.com. We may be able to answer your question on a future episode. If you want to join our Facebook community where everyone is walking through a Course in Miracles together, you can find us at A Course in Miracles with the Wild Reverend. And you can also find us on Twitter at Wild Manhattan.